Pilipinas bilang isang bansang sagana
pa rin ang gutom sa bansa.
Kapag walang-wala na sa budget.
The province is expecting to lose at least half its crop.
Old Philippine history is not just a series of battles and revolutions. It is a history that revolves around the land, how it was controlled, divided, and fought for. We explore the different eras of significant agrarian reforms from the time of the Spaniards up to the present through this movie. The first part of the film explains the main idea of the documentary, which is the indispensable rule of land in the Philippine society and how the people's fights for it were their political struggles throughout time. Spanish officials through the encomienda system took over the land and basically had all the power. Instead of protection, the natives were exploited, taxed, and forced to hard labor. It made the problem of inequality worse. Many Filipino farmers were turned into agricultural workers who live on the land without having any rights. Thus, the problem of social and economic injustice grew deep. Church was the largest landowner in the Philippines that caused a huge gap between the landowners, priors who live comfortable and the farmers who live in terrible conditions and with a high rent. Thus many people supported the revolution due to their dissatisfaction with this injustice.
American period. First, Land Registration Act Number 496. The introduction of Act Number 496 by the American was intended to provide farmer proof of ownership of land using the Torrens title system. However, many Filipinos had lived on their lands for generations without any documentation and therefore could not procreate legally. What was intended to be a fair law left many poor Filipinos without the ability to secure their land. 2. Public Land Act. The purpose of this act was to give Filipinos the ability to apply for public lands, which is turn would let Filipinos cultivate and develop these lands into productive farming areas. Initially, there seemed to be a good idea that this act could contribute to increase of the Philippines agriculture industry. However, the application process was complicated and required money, knowledge of the laws, and the ability to complete forms, which is something most farmers do not have. Number 3. Torrens system. The Torrens system was developed to clarify, legitimize, and protect land ownership. Once an individual has a Torrens title, their title to the property is protected and protected against any further claims on the property. Commonwealth period. Number 1. Tenancy Act of 1933, Act Number 4054. The 1933 Tenants Law was an early attempt by the government to solve the problems that many tenant farmers face with regard to how powers were distributed amongst landlord-tenant relationship. At that time, the landlord had most of the powers in this relationship, while tenant farmers were often unfairly subjected to abusive working conditions. The tenant law set forth some of the basic rights of tenants, such as how to share the harvest from the land. 2.
Reform Act of 1955 was an important step in showing that the government began to understand the unfairness of having tenant farmers. While it did not have a major impact at the time, it opened up the door for further reform in the years to come. Importance of PD 27 was that it allowed thousands of farmers to become landowners. This reduced the dependent relationship between landlord and farmers and helped improve farmers' feelings of security. However, the narrow focus of the decrement that many farmers, those not growing rice or corn, were not included, indicating a continuing need for broader reform in the future.
Post-EDSA to present CARP RA 6657-1988. The CARP program was the largest agrarian reforms initiative in the Philippines. Its goal were to provide lands to agricultural laborers, to support those farmers in making living on their properties, taught loans and technical assistance, and to provide all types of physical infrastructure that should enable the development of both productivity and livelihood for agrarian reform beneficiaries. CARPER RA 9700-2009. CARPER represents an extension of the CARP program. It expands on the CARP program by increasing available funding, accelerating distribution of land, and strengthening legal protection in order to ensure that they are able not only to own but also successfully utilize and profit from the lands they have been assigned.
American colonization period 1898-1946. A Public Land Act 1902 proposed to regulate ownership of public land and distribution of lands. Key provisions provide for the acquisition of government lands by private individuals, establish a land registration system. Problem addressed was an attempt to reduce land ownership disputes and help formalize property rights. Weaknesses: the system mainly benefit wealthy and corporate landowners and limited opportunities for small farmers to purchase land.
To understand how agrarian policies have tried to address land inequality in the Philippines for centuries, is essential to understand how agrarian policies were created at all. These agrarian laws began with Spanish colonialism, when some laws were used to protect tenants from being exploited by their landlords. The most recent agrarian legislation, such as CARP and CARPER, focuses on providing land to farmers and creating a support system for the farmers.